Welcome to Honeybee. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Real stories of love, lies, and betrayal, where every truth stings. Let's begin. My wife spent 15 years warning me that she would one day take everything I had. My name is Kevin, and when she finally acted on that threat, she learned that what existed was far less than she had imagined. Our marriage did not begin with arguments over money. In the early years, we were fighting a different battle, one that slowly drained us long before finances ever became a problem. My wife and I wanted children. We tried for years. We endured fertility treatments, endless doctor appointments, and more heartbreak than words can fully explain. Anyone who has not lived through that experience would struggle to understand it. Each failed attempt pushed us a little farther apart. Every negative test result added more weight to a silence that grew heavier month after month. We never spoke openly about how much this was damaging us. Instead, we allowed the frustration to build until it began spilling into other areas of our lives. Small disagreements turned into serious conflicts. Simple conversations shifted into accusations. By the time we accepted that biological children were not going to be part of our future, the pattern of fighting had already become ingrained in our marriage. The fertility struggle did not destroy us outright, but it cracked the foundation, and everything else eventually fell through those fractures. After that chapter faded into the background, money became the new battlefield. My wife had clear expectations about how she believed we should be living, and those expectations did not align with our actual financial reality. I own my own business, which meant our income fluctuated based on contracts and market conditions. Some years were strong. Other years required discipline, careful budgeting, and saying no to things we wanted. My wife did not view it that way. She believed I was deliberately holding back, that I was overly cautious, that I was denying her the lifestyle she felt she deserved after everything we had endured together. Every discussion about buying something became an argument. Every bill that arrived became another chance for her to tell me I was failing as a provider. The final argument happened on an afternoon that felt ordinary in every way. I had returned home from work and could already feel the tension in the house before she even spoke. Ever since her friend bought a new Range Rover, she had been unhappy with her 3-year-old RAV4. It started with comments under her breath and persistent nagging. I didn't wait for the situation to explode. I tried to explain, as I had many times before, that our finances did not support everything she wanted immediately, and that we needed patience and long-term planning when it came to major purchases. She refused to listen. Her voice rose. Her words became sharper. She accused me of being cheap, told me I cared about everything more than her happiness, and claimed I had wasted the best years of her life. Then she said the words I had heard countless times before. She told me she was going back to her ex-boyfriend. She declared that when she left, she would take half of everything I owned. She delivered the threat like a weapon, fully expecting me to collapse the way I always had before. In the past, those words sent me into panic. I apologized for things that were not my fault. I promised to change, to spend more, to do better. I begged her to stay, terrified of losing a marriage I had poured so much of myself into. But standing there in the kitchen that afternoon, something was different. The panic never arrived. The desperation didn't rise in my chest. I looked at my wife, at the anger in her expression and the certainty in her eyes, and I felt an unexpected calm. I simply nodded and waited. My reaction seemed to unsettle her. It was as if she had expected the familiar display of fear and pleading. When it didn't come, she paused, then walked out of the kitchen into the bedroom and slammed the door behind her. I stood there alone, realizing that years of hearing the same threat over and over had changed me in ways I hadn't fully recognized until that moment. Each time she promised to leave and take half of my life with her, a small piece of my emotional investment died. Every time I begged her to stay, I lost more respect for myself and for her. By the time we reached that final argument, there was nothing left to destroy. Somewhere deep inside, I had already accepted that she would eventually do exactly what she had been threatening all along. I had prepared myself quietly for that day, and when it finally arrived, I realized I was ready. The evening that altered everything didn't announce itself with warning signs. I came home as I always did, unlocked the door, and stepped into silence. I expected to see my wife watching television or preparing dinner. Those routines had continued for years, even during periods when we barely spoke. But that night, the house was completely quiet. I called her name. There was no response. I placed my keys on the table near the door and walked into the living room, immediately sensing that something was wrong. The framed photos my wife had hung on the walls were gone, pictures of her family and memories from trips that mattered to her. The decorative pieces she had chosen over countless shopping trips, the vases, candles, and small sculptures she insisted gave the space character, had disappeared from the shelves. I moved into the kitchen and found the same emptiness. Her favorite coffee mug was missing. The refrigerator still contained food, but the items she bought specifically for herself were gone. I walked through the house, each room confirming what the previous one suggested. When I opened the bedroom closet, the story was complete. Her side was completely empty. Every dress, every pair of shoes, every coat, sweater, and piece of jewelry had been taken. The bathroom counter, once crowded with her products, now held only my toothbrush and razor. I stood in the bedroom doorway and looked at the bed. A neatly stacked pile of papers sat centered on the comforter. I knew exactly what they were before I touched them. I had imagined this moment during quiet hours when my wife wasn't home, allowing myself to think about what would happen if she ever followed through. The divorce papers were thick, professionally prepared, and filled with demands. She wanted a house. She wanted to share my business. She demanded spousal support and an asset division based on the belief that I had far more wealth than I actually did. There was no note, no explanation, no goodbye, no message of anger or closure. She had gathered her belongings, placed the legal documents on the bed, and walked out of our marriage exactly as she had threatened for years. I expected devastation. Instead, I felt sadness, but nothing overwhelming. Sadness for the 15 years we had shared and the dreams we once held. I sat there holding the papers, accepted that the marriage was over, and began thinking about what came next. The following morning, I woke earlier than usual. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table scrolling through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Months earlier, a colleague had given me the number of a divorce attorney after I vaguely mentioned that my marriage was struggling. I had saved the number, but never called. Making that call would have meant admitting that my marriage was beyond repair, and I hadn't been ready to accept that while my wife still lived in the house. Now, there was nothing left to protect. I dialed the number before I could change my mind. The office answered on the third ring. I explained my situation plainly. My wife had left. She had served me with divorce papers. I needed legal representation. The receptionist took my information and scheduled a meeting later that week. I agreed, then spent the rest of the morning gathering every financial document I could find. Bank statements from previous years, business records showing income, expenses, and profits, receipts for major purchases I had made with my own money, property documents I knew would become important. I organized everything carefully into labeled folders, preparing for a battle I had always hoped would never happen. The first meeting with my attorney was direct and efficient. I explained the history of my marriage, the repeated threats, and the demands outlined in the divorce papers. He listened closely and asked detailed questions, especially about the house and my business. I answered honestly. The house was not in my name. My business income had declined due to market conditions. He nodded, made notes, and explained what lay ahead. My wife believed she was entitled to a large settlement. She assumed the house was marital property. She believed my business success meant hidden wealth. She thought our lifestyle reflected disposable income rather than careful budgeting. The divorce became contentious almost immediately. She hired an aggressive attorney who pursued maximum compensation. Their demands were built on assumptions she had carried throughout our marriage. Financial disclosure followed. Both sides were required to provide complete documentation of assets, debts, and income. For most couples, it is tedious. For my wife, it was devastating. The first shock came during mediation when my attorney presented the house deed. My wife stared at it as if expecting an error. The document listed my parents as the legal owners, recorded years before we married. Her attorney examined it, then whispered to her. The message was clear. The house was not mine. It never had been. Attempts were made to argue around the issue. Claims of implied ownership were raised. My attorney responded with records showing that no marital funds had ever gone toward the house. My parents had covered all costs. There was nothing left to argue. The second realization involved personal property. I had purchased several valuable items with my own funds and documented everything carefully. Receipts and bank records showed they belonged solely to me. Those demands disappeared quickly. The final revelation hit hardest. My wife believed I had hidden wealth. Financial disclosures proved otherwise. No secret accounts. No investments. No reserve funds. I watched her confidence collapse as each assumption was disproven. The divorce continued. Expectations adjusted. Demands softened. I wondered briefly if she considered stopping the process. If she did, she never reached out. And if she had, my answer would have been no. The marriage had ended long before the paperwork. When it was finalized, I felt no victory, only relief. The silence afterward taught me what peace truly felt like. My life became simple, quiet, clear. Months later, I learned she returned to her ex. It didn't go well. A year later, someone asked me to help her. I declined. I closed every door. My life now is calm, stable, and mine, and I am at peace with that.